Captain William Ironhand Carter stood in the control room of the USS Phantom, watching the depth gauge climb past 400 meters. They weren't supposed to go this deep. The hull wasn't rated for it, but they had no choice. Above them, 3 Japanese destroyers methodically grid-searched the Pacific, dropping depth charges in a pattern so precise it seemed almost personal. One wrong move, one careless sound, and 63 men would die in a tomb of crushed steel. But that wasn't what kept Carter awake at night. It was the sealed envelope in his safe, the one marked Eyes Only, Silence Protocol, the one he'd been ordered to open if certain conditions were met. And 47 minutes ago, those conditions had been met. "Captain," whispered Executive Officer Jake Morrison, his voice barely audible even in the tomb-like quiet of silent running. "Hull integrity at 68%. We can't go deeper." Carter didn't respond immediately. His eyes were locked on the sonar display, watching the 3 destroyer contacts slowly converge on their position. They were herding him, pushing him down, deeper and deeper, until the ocean itself became the executioner. Morrison leaned closer. "Sir, I know that look. What's in that envelope?" Carter's jaw tightened. The Silence Protocol. He'd heard rumors about it during his training at New London, whispered stories in the officers' mess. A contingency plan so classified that even admirals weren't fully briefed. A protocol that gave submarine captains one final option when all others had failed. An option that required sacrificing everything they believed in. "Jake," Carter said quietly, "go check on the forward torpedo room. Make sure the tubes are ready." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "Captain, we've been silent for 6 hours. If we fire torpedoes now, that's an order, Commander." Morrison held his gaze for 3 long seconds, then nodded and disappeared through the forward hatch. The moment he was gone, Carter opened his safe and pulled out the envelope. His hands were steady. They always were, even when his heart was screaming. He broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 12 lines of text. Carter read it once, then again. Then he closed his eyes and felt something inside him break. The Silence Protocol was simple. If trapped with no possibility of escape, if enemy vessels prevented surfacing, if crew survival was impossible, the captain was ordered to activate the emergency ballast blow at maximum depth. The resulting ascent would be catastrophic. The submarine would rise like a missile, breaching the surface at lethal speed. The hull would crack, the crew compartments would flood, but the explosion of a submarine breaking the surface would look, on enemy sonar, like a successful depth charge kill. The destroyers would stop hunting. They'd mark the sector as clear, and any other Allied submarines in the area would have a chance to escape. One boat dies, so others might live. That was the Silence Protocol. Carter folded the paper carefully and placed it back in the safe. Then he walked to the periscope station where Chief Petty Officer Bull Rodriguez stood watch. Bull was 48 years old, a career Navy man who'd survived 3 submarine patrols and had a daughter graduating high school next month. He'd shown Carter her picture just yesterday. "Bull," Carter said quietly, "I need you to gather the senior staff. Wardroom, 5 minutes." Bull's weathered face showed no emotion, but his eyes asked the question his mouth couldn't. "Why?" "Just do it, Chief." 5 minutes later, Carter stood before his senior staff, Jake Morrison, Bull Rodriguez, Lieutenant Nina Sparrow Chen, and Chief Engineer Marcus Wrench Thompson. They sat in the cramped wardroom, surrounded by the groaning metal of a submarine being slowly crushed by the Pacific. "Gentlemen, lady," Carter began, "I'm about to share classified information. What I'm about to tell you is known by fewer than 50 people in the entire United States Navy." He placed the Silence Protocol document on the table. They read it in silence. Sparrow's face went pale. Wrench's hands began to shake. Bull just stared at the paper, his massive shoulders sagging. Morrison was the first to speak. "You can't be serious." "The conditions have been met," Carter said flatly. "We're at crushed depth with no possibility of escape. 3 destroyers above us. No friendly vessels within 200 miles. Oxygen reserves at critical. The protocol is clear." "The protocol is murder," Morrison snapped, his voice rising. "We can still..." We can still what, Jake? Carter's voice was cold, controlled. Surface and surrender? You know what the Japanese do to submarine crews. We've all seen the intelligence reports. Wrench finally found his voice. There has to be another way. We can wait them out. We have 4 hours of oxygen left, Sparrow interrupted, her navigator's precision cutting through the emotion. Maybe less. The CO2 scrubbers are failing. We're already seeing symptoms in the crew. Headaches, confusion, nausea. Bull leaned forward, his voice a low rumble. Captain, I've followed you through 3 patrols. I've never questioned your orders. But this, he gestured at the document. This ain't an order. This is asking us to kill ourselves. No, Carter said. It's asking me to kill you. There's a difference. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Morrison stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the deck. I won't allow it. I'll relieve you of command if I have to. Carter met his eyes. They'd served together for 2 years, survived situations that should have killed them both. But Morrison had a wife, 3 kids, a life waiting for him back in San Diego. You don't have the authority, Jake, and you know it. Then I'll make you shoot me first, Morrison said quietly. Because that's the only way I'll let you execute this crew. Before Carter could respond, the submarine shuddered violently. Alarms began to shriek. Depth charge, someone shouted from the control room. They all ran. The next explosion was closer, and the one after that was even closer still. Carter gripped the periscope housing as the submarine bucked like a wild animal. Around him, his crew held on to whatever they could, their faces pale in the red emergency lighting. He could see it in their eyes, the knowledge that they were being hunted, that every passing second brought them closer to the end. Hull breach in the aft torpedo room, Wrench shouted over the alarms. Sealing bulkhead doors now. Carter checked the depth gauge. 420 meters. Beyond safe limits. The hull groaned like a dying whale. He looked around the control room. Saw young Tommy Static Wells at the radio station, barely 20 years old, his hands shaking as he adjusted frequencies that would never receive a response. Saw Sparrow at her navigation table, her face set in grim concentration as she calculated escape routes that didn't exist. Saw Bull moving through the compartment, calm and steady, checking on each crew member with the practiced ease of a man who'd spent his entire adult life on submarines. These were his men, his responsibility, his family. The silence protocol envelope felt like it was burning a hole in his pocket. Another depth charge exploded, this one close enough to shatter a gauge on the forward panel. Glass rained down. Someone shouted. The lights flickered. And then Carter heard it. A sound that didn't belong. 3 soft knocks. Tap, tap, tap. They came from the pressure hull itself, reverberating through the steel with an eerie clarity that cut through all the chaos and noise. Everyone in the control room froze. Did you hear that? Sparrow whispered. The knocks came again. Tap, tap, tap. Same rhythm, same location, somewhere aft near the engine room. Bull's face went white. Captain, that's not a depth charge. I know, Carter said. He moved toward the aft hatch, drawn by instinct, by 23 years of submarine service that had taught him to recognize every sound a boat could make. This sound was wrong. This sound shouldn't exist. The knocks came a 3rd time as he reached the engine room entrance. Tap, tap, tap. And then a voice, faint, distorted, as if traveling through water and metal and time itself. Ironhand. Carter's blood turned to ice. No one had called him that since... Captain! Bull appeared at his shoulder. Sir, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Carter's hand was on the engine room hatch, his fingers numb. The knocking had stopped. The voice was gone. But he knew what he'd heard, and more importantly, he knew who had spoken. Get me a diving suit, he said quietly. Sir? A diving suit, Chief. Now. Morrison grabbed his arm. Carter, what the hell are you doing? There's someone in the flooded compartment. That's impossible. We sealed that section an hour ago. Anyone in there is... I know what they are, Jake, Carter interrupted. Get me the suit. 10 minutes later, Carter stood in the cramped airlock between the engine room and the flooded aft torpedo room. The diving suit was old, patched, barely functional, but it would hold. It had to. Bull helped him seal the helmet. Through the glass faceplate, Carter could see the concern in the chief's eyes. "I don't know what you're doing, Captain," Bull said, "but I hope you come back." "If I don't," Carter replied, "the silence protocol documents are in my safe. Morrison has the combination." He opened the inner hatch before Bull could respond. Water rushed in, cold, dark Pacific water that tasted of salt and death. The pressure equalized. Carter stepped through the opening into the flooded compartment. His flashlight beam cut through murky water filled with debris, floating papers, a coffee cup drifting lazily past, a photograph of someone's family tumbling in the current. The torpedo tubes were ahead, all 6 of them, their massive doors sealed against the ocean. Carter's breath was loud in his helmet, amplified by the confined space. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. And then he saw him. A figure standing near torpedo tube number 3. Not floating, standing. As if the water didn't exist, as if gravity still worked, as if he was still alive. "Hello, William," said Commander Robert "Ghost" Mackenzie. Carter's mentor, his first captain, the man who'd taught him everything he knew about submarines. The man who'd died 7 years ago when his submarine, the USS Barracuda, went down with all hands in these same waters. "You're not real," Carter whispered. Ghost smiled. It was the same smile Carter remembered from a dozen shared watches, 100 cups of terrible submarine coffee. "Does it matter?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because if you're not real," Carter said slowly, "then I'm hallucinating from CO2 poisoning. And if you are real, then you're being haunted by a dead man," Ghost finished. "Either way, William, you're in trouble." Carter couldn't argue with that logic. He watched as Ghost moved through the water, not swimming, just moving, as if he still commanded his own vessel and was simply walking through the corridors. "The silence protocol," Ghost said. "They gave it to you." It wasn't a question. "How did you—" "Because they gave it to me too." Ghost turned to face him. 7 years ago. Same situation, same choice. 3 destroyers above us. No escape, no hope. Carter's throat tightened. "What did you do?" "I activated it," Ghost said simply. "Emergency ballast blow at 400 meters. The boat rose so fast, the hull came apart like wet paper. Took 16 seconds from activation to impact. 57 men died instantly, including me." "Then why?" Carter gestured helplessly. "Why are you here?" "Because I need to tell you something, William. Something I learned in those 16 seconds. Ghost floated closer. In the beam of Carter's flashlight, his face looked exactly as Carter remembered, weathered, wise, with eyes that had seen too much. "The silence protocol is a lie," Ghost said. "What?" "It's not about sacrificing one boat to save others. It's about giving captains permission to quit, to take the easy way out when things get hard." Ghost's voice turned hard. "I activated it because I was tired, William. Tired of the pressure. Tired of the responsibility. Tired of watching young men die because of my decisions. The protocol gave me an excuse to end it, and I took it." Carter shook his head. "That's not—" "Not what?" Ghost challenged. "Not what you would do, not how it works. William, I know you. I trained you, and right now you're standing in a flooded compartment talking to a ghost because you're looking for permission. Permission to activate the protocol. Permission to end the suffering. Permission to stop being responsible for 63 lives." The words hit like depth charges, because they were true. "But here's what I learned," Ghost continued. "In those 16 seconds between activation and impact, when the hull was coming apart and men were screaming and the ocean was rushing in, you know what I realized?" Carter couldn't speak. "I realized I'd quit too soon. There was another way. There's always another way. I just couldn't see it because I was too focused on the obvious choices, surface or die, fight or surrender, protocol or mutiny." Ghost moved closer until his face filled Carter's vision. "You're better than I was, William. You don't need permission to do what's right. You need permission to do what's impossible." "I don't understand." "Yes, you do," Ghost said. "You've always understood. That's why they call you Ironhand. Not because you're tough. Because when everyone else sees walls, you see doors." And then Ghost was gone. Not fading, Not disappearing, just gone, as if he'd never been there. Carter stood alone in the flooded compartment, his flashlight beam playing across empty water, but he wasn't alone. He never had been. He returned to the control room to find his senior staff waiting. Morrison looked up as Carter removed his helmet. "Well, I found something," Carter said. "What?" "A way out." He moved to the navigation table where Sparrow had their position plotted, trapped in a valley between two underwater ridges, with destroyers above them in a pattern designed to prevent any escape. It was a perfect trap, which meant it had a weakness. "Sparrow," Carter said, "show me the current." She pulled up the charts, highlighting the deep ocean current that flowed through this sector. Strong, fast, running east to west through the valley. "Bull," Carter continued, "what's our ballast status? We can pump enough for positive buoyancy, Captain, but we surface and those destroyers—" "We're not surfacing," Carter interrupted. "Wrench, can you give me full power to the props for exactly 90 seconds? The engineer looked confused. "Yes, but—" "Don't ask questions yet. Jake, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Morrison studied him for a long moment, finally nodded. "Always have, Captain." "Good, because we're about to do something stupid." Carter pointed at the navigation chart. "Sparrow, calculate this. Emergency ballast blow to achieve neutral buoyancy. Use the current to carry us through the valley at maximum speed. Props at full power for 90 seconds to maintain control. Then emergency dive, back to 400 meters. The room fell silent. Sparrow's eyes widened. "Captain, you're talking about riding the current like surfing," Morrison finished, his voice barely above a whisper. "Holy hell. You want to surf a submarine through enemy waters. It'll look like debris on their sonar," Carter explained. "A brief contact, moving too fast to be a submarine, disappearing as quickly as it appeared. By the time they realize what happened, we'll be 20 miles away in the next valley." Wrench shook his head. "The hull stress alone will kill us," Bull finished. "Or it'll save us." Carter met each of their eyes in turn. "I'm not activating the silence protocol. I'm not asking you to die. I'm asking you to trust me one more time." Morrison straightened, smiled. "Well, Captain, it is a stupid plan." "The stupidest," Sparrow agreed. "I can't believe I'm saying this," Wrench muttered, "but it might actually work." Bull just grinned. "Submarines don't surf. Hell, let's teach these bastards something new." Carter felt something unlock in his chest. Not relief, not hope, just certainty. This was why he commanded submarines. Not to die heroically, but to find impossible solutions when all the obvious ones had failed. "All hands," he announced over the intercom. "This is the captain. In 60 seconds we're going to do something you've never done before. Trust your training, trust your crew, and hold on to something." He looked at his senior staff. "Gentlemen, lady, let's go surfing." The next 5 minutes were chaos. The controlled, precise chaos of a submarine crew executing an impossible maneuver. Wrench stood at the engineering console, his hands dancing over controls, ready to give them 90 seconds of power that the engines weren't designed to produce. Sparrow calculated angles and speeds with a precision that would make mathematicians weep. Bull moved through the boat, making sure every man was secured, every hatch was dogged, every loose object was stowed. Morrison stood beside Carter, silent, steady, ready. And Carter placed his hand on the ballast control. "On my mark," he said quietly. 3. Above them, the destroyers continued their methodical search, unaware, unsuspecting. 2. In the flooded aft compartment, Carter imagined he could still see Ghost, standing, watching, approving. 1. He pulled the lever. Emergency ballast blow. Air rushed into the tanks with a sound like thunder. The submarine began to rise, not the catastrophic ascent of the silence protocol, a controlled rise, careful, measured. "Neutral buoyancy achieved," Sparrow called out. "Current is taking us." Speed increasing. 10 knots. 15. 20. The hull groaned. Metal stressed past its limits, but it held. "Wrench, now!" Carter shouted. The engines roared to life, full power. 90 seconds. The submarine shot through the water like a missile, riding the current, the props screaming, every rivet and weld tested to destruction. Above them, the Japanese destroyer's sonar operators frowned at their screens. A contact, fast, too fast, gone in seconds. Debris from a destroyed submarine, they concluded. Nothing more. Below them, the USS Phantom surfed through the valley, a submarine doing something submarines were never designed to do, piloted by a captain who refused to accept the obvious answer. 60 seconds, Morrison called out. 70! The hull groaned louder. A pipe burst. Someone screamed. 80! They were through the valley. Into the next sector. Free. Clear. 90 seconds! Carter hit the emergency dive control. Take us down, Sparrow. 400 meters. Fast! The submarine dropped like a stone. The engines cut. The boat fell into blessed silence. And above them, the destroyers continued their search in the wrong sector, hunting a ghost that was already gone. In the control room, nobody spoke for 30 seconds. Then Bull started laughing, a deep belly laugh that was part relief, part hysteria, part pure joy. The laughter spread. Sparrow. Wrench. Even Morrison cracked a smile. Carter allowed himself a small grin. They'd done it. They'd survived. They'd found the impossible solution. Captain, Morrison said, wiping tears from his eyes. Remind me never to doubt you again. Noted, Commander. The USS Phantom continued east, silent and unseen, carrying 63 men who should have died but didn't. That night, after the watch change, Carter returned to his quarters and pulled out the silence protocol document. He read it one final time. Then he tore it into small pieces and flushed them through the head. Some protocols were meant to be broken, some orders were meant to be ignored, and some captains were meant to find doors where others only saw walls. 3 days later, they made it back to Pearl Harbor. The debriefing was intense. Admiral Richardson listened to Carter's report in silence, his face unreadable. You ignored the silence protocol, the Admiral said finally. Yes, sir. You performed an unauthorized maneuver that could have destroyed your vessel. Yes, sir. You risked the lives of your entire crew on an untested theory. Yes, sir. Admiral Richardson leaned back in his chair. Captain Carter, you're either the bravest submarine commander in the Pacific Fleet or the most reckless. Permission to speak freely, sir. Granted. I prefer creative, sir. The Admiral's stern expression cracked. A smile appeared, then a laugh. Dismissed, Captain, and for God's sake don't try surfing any more submarines. My heart can't take it. Carter saluted and left the office. Outside, his crew was waiting. Bull, Morrison, Sparrow, Wrench, Tommy, all 63 of them, alive. What did he say? Morrison asked. Carter smiled. He said we're heroes. And we're also insane. Bull laughed. Sounds about right. They walked together toward the submarine dock, where the USS Phantom sat, battered but intact, ready for the next patrol. That night, Carter stood on the dock alone, looking at his boat. In the darkness, he thought he saw a figure standing on the conning tower, a figure that looked familiar. Ghost raised his hand in salute. Carter returned it, and then the figure was gone. Thank you, Carter whispered to the darkness. The ocean kept many secrets, but tonight it had given one back. The knowledge that giving up was never the only option, that there was always another way, that submarines could surf, and that the best captains were the ones who refused to accept impossible. Captain William Ironhand Carter commanded the USS Phantom for 2 more years, survived 12 more patrols, brought his crew home every single time. He never activated the silence protocol. He never needed to, because he'd learned the most important lesson any submarine captain could learn. The pressure doesn't break you. Fear doesn't break you. Impossible situations don't break you. You break when you stop looking for doors, and Captain Carter never stopped looking.